Good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this Tuesday, April 25th. Nice to have you here. And Dee, would you please call roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Garrido.
Here.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks. Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
We were notified both by Ann Parks and Pat Wright they could be here tonight. Do I hear a motion to excuse?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, under announcements tonight, this week we welcome the group of Okinawan delegates to Pullman. They toured City Hall on Friday. They also went through the fire department, the police department. They always like to do this. Some of them that were here are like superintendents of instruction back in Okinawa. And Alex, who leads the whole group, just great to have them back after COVID. So we had a chance to be with them for quite a bit, and they really enjoyed their time. And this summer, they'll be sending their students here for English immersion time with the international programs at WSU. Tomorrow, April 26th, is Denim Day. We invite the Pullman community to join city staff by wearing denim to raise awareness around sexual violence issues and as a symbol of our commitment to support survivors and continue to educate ourselves and each other to make safer space for all. Currently, applications are being accepted for the Arts Commission, Civil Service Commission, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. If interested, please visit boards and commissions on our city website. On Monday morning of this week, registration for summer parks and recreation programs officially kicked off, and it was busy. So sign-ups go fast, so don't miss out on your favorite sports and classes. Register with Parks and Recreation online or by phone during the business hours. Next week, we usher in the month of May, which means flowers for some, but savings for others. May is one of only 3 times throughout the year where you can pick up an annual membership at the Pullman Aquatic and Fitness Center at a 20% discount. That's right, 20%. Learn about the benefits and purchase your membership online or over the phone starting May 1st. And Megan Guido, as Mayor Pro Tem, had a chance to be part of Arbor Day today, and thank you very much for filling in for me. And so we do have a proclamation. We're not going to read the whole thing, but it says, whereas in 1872, Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And we certainly have done that because we are the Tree City USA, recognized for 26 years. So those are the announcements tonight. And now comes the presentation. Our first one from Matt Young in Communications, talking about the website redesign. Matt, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'll be addressing the website redesign project that we've been working on. I'll introduce Thomas Jean shortly. He's standing by remotely to give a short presentation, but he is City of Pullman's assigned revised project manager for the website project. He was chosen, Revise was chosen as our web agency by our web work group, and I'll kind of take a few minutes to kind of set the stage for what was included in your packet. So when I arrived in this position in February of 2022, I was tasked with completing an internal communications audit, and during that audit, identified several key improvement areas and some inadequacies with Civic Live, which is our current web host and service provider. The inadequacies identified were concerning not only for our internal users, our City of Pullman staff who are continually updating and adding content to our website on a daily basis, but also for external users and those throughout our community and beyond, in most cases who may not be able to enjoy a productive or pleasing online experience. So as discussions kind of continued from post-audit, it became clear that a change was needed, which led to a submittal of the 2023 Capital Improvement Program to fund the new website, which was approved. And this was strategic as the city's contract with Civic Live was set to expire in November 21st of this year. So we wanted to kind of get ahead of that project. So, so once the website was approved through the CIP, I formed a web group consisting of IT manager Morgan Sherwood, administrative assistant for Darby Baldwin, our recently departed Economic Development Manager Jennifer Hackman, GIS Administrator Sam Jenkins, Library Director Dan Owens, Civil Engineer Morgan Porter, and of course overseen by City Administrator Mike Urban. I wish to take a couple of minutes to just thank my team, all the folks that I mentioned, for investing their time and effort in this project. Each person took ownership and contributed heavily, in addition to their normal day-to-day duties, to get us to where we are today. So I wanted to thank my group for that. Through a series of meetings, the web work group discussed the challenges and opportunities with our website, as well as priorities that were important to communicate to potential web partners in a request for proposals. We executed an RFP by which we received 14 quality submittals, and Revise was my team's top selection. Their proposal was on point, addressed our needs, including their ability to meet a Q4 2023 deadline for a launch date. As we are up to begin the design process with Revise, we would like to provide the council the opportunity to deliver any additional feedback that you may have and suggestions. Your thoughts will help our team define objectives for the new website, and with Revise's expertise and their experience building effective websites in the government space, we hope to deliver a much improved product to our audience and our visitors. So with that, I'll introduce Thomas Jean from Revise. He's joining us remotely, has prepared a short presentation. He'll show you some of the websites that they've created and share more about his agency. We're really excited that we have been able to partner with this very capable agency, and we believe that partnership is going to give us a much needed upgrade to the City of Pullman's online presence. So again, we welcome any additional feedback the council has to offer. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for having me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all, and you should be seeing my screen. Thank you all for having me. My name is Thomas Jean. I am with Revise, and of course, we'll be the firm hopefully working with you on the new website. So I'm just going to go through about a 5 to 10 minute presentation here, and then whatever time you all have left, we can use for questions, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as you have. By the way, I am going to be your project manager, so if you ever have a question or you don't know who to talk to or you just need some type of update, I'll be the person that you'll want to contact. So real quick, just a little bit about Revise. We are headquartered out here in Troy, Michigan, and all we do is build websites for government. We've been doing that for over 20 years now. And a couple of things that we do really well. One is our content management system. That's the tool that the staff there will use to edit and update the website. It's extremely easy to use, and we'll provide full training to them on that tool. Also, we do keep it updated in terms of the software. We do update it about 4 times a year, so it's always going to be getting better, and you're going to have the latest and greatest as long as you are a Revise client. Now, also during the process, we do 100% custom design from scratch. We don't use templates. We won't copy a website. We're going to design it exclusively just for the City of Pullman there, so that it showcases what you want it to showcase about the city, and not some copy of another website that you may have seen multiple times elsewhere. And then also during the process, we'll do a full content audit and re-architecture. So instead of just like copying and pasting the content as is, we'll actually develop what's called a new sitemap that ideally will help folks find what they're looking for easier than they may be able to today. Now, in terms of our client base, we've now launched about 3,000 websites nationwide. All of them are cities, counties, towns, villages, municipalities across the country. Here are some of our cities. Here are some of our counties. And of course, we have many in the state of Washington, a few of which I'll show you today. Now, also with us, you will have tech support. So once we build the site, we're not just going to leave you and say see you later. You have unlimited tech support with us. When you call in, your team there should expect we know you by name. Or that we learn it very quickly. Also, the people that you speak with here for any tech support issues, they are developers themselves. So the advantage of that is that the person you're talking to is actually the person fixing whatever issue it is that you might have. On top of that, we have a 24-hour customer support portal online. We have a support@revise.com email. We have an online help center, and then we do retraining for free anytime. So if you ever get a new employee or someone just forgot how to do something, you don't have to be worried about paying extra to us for training. It's always included at no additional charge, as long as you're with us. So in terms of the process, the way we would start it off is with what we call a kickoff meeting. We would first send you a questionnaire that's real basic and just ask the web team there some basic questions about what they want to see in the new website, what are the most important features, that sort of thing. Then, if you want to, we will also allow you to look through our previous design work. And if you want to, you can also pick the person here at Revise that will design your website. And that's kind of a unique thing. And it gives you confidence that you're going to know that that person is talented, which when it comes to design, talent really matters above all else. And then you're also going to know that they're experienced. You don't want someone designing your new website that just started last week. You want someone that really knows what they're doing and has a full portfolio for you to look through. Now, if you don't want to pick, we'll pick for you. And we do that probably for most of our clients, I'd say. Then we will provide you with a mock-up of what we're proposing the new website's going to look like. This is one we did for the city of Olympia there in Washington. It is completely custom designed just for you. You'll get to review it, and you'll get to tell us any and as many changes as you want made. Could be color, could be style. You could say that you don't quite like the links we did here to the right. You could scroll down and say, get rid of this section completely. You could even say that we completely missed the mark and you don't quite like anything good. That is very rare, but we're open to that type of feedback for sure. And then based on your feedback, we will then give you a revision. In fact, we'll give you unlimited revisions to the mock-up. Now we try to limit it to about 5 or 6 at most. Most of our clients will go no more than about 3. So we'll try to keep it around there, but we do give you unlimited just so you'll have the confidence that you're going to know that that you're going to get what you want and something that really represents the community well. And if you would like to take a look after tonight, you can actually view their live website at olympiawa.gov. So this is a revised website. And I believe it was November of last year, this one won the 3CMA award for the best website in the country. And I think it was in all categories. So I can get you the exact award name and category it won, but I think it was overall best website in the country according to 3CMA. So that's the city of Olympia. Now the good news is pretty much any feature you see within this site, we can build into your site. And of course, there will be some things you do not want to do that Olympia is doing and vice versa, but this is just a great overall example of what could be done. So definitely keep that in mind as you're thinking about what you might want. Now you may be seeing the video a little bit choppy here. That's just because of the meeting software we're using, or any meeting software would do that. But the video will come through totally fine. You can do video, photos, or a combination of both. So now also in your website, you're going to get a ton of features and modules and web apps, we call them, that are going to be in there. This full list here, which we won't have time to get to today, but a couple of just quick ones I wanted to show you. One is something I think would improve the website in America, and that is what we call a curated search. So most searches today are using Google or Bing or a very simple algorithm that's searching the most recent thing that has that word in it. With a curated search, we and the city staff there can manipulate these results and decide what comes up based on the knowledge and the analytics that we have. So for example, if I type in the word water on this website, the city has decided that these are the results that come up when someone types in the word water. And what's really nice about it is you'll have full control over that. So if you want to change it to this third result as number 1, you can do that instantly. And you don't have to wait for Google or Bing or some other algorithm that we don't understand to do it for you. So you can really fine tune this to fit what your community wants and what the analytics will tell us. And then also it's really nice because it has synonyms and misspelling. So if we misspell the word water terribly, like WTR, it's still smart enough to know that's what we're looking for. And then same with the synonym, like H2O, still knows what we're looking for and feeds us that result which is anything to do with water. So something we really recommend, and the reason this is important is probably the top, say, 20% of your pages are easily getting 80 to 90% of the traffic to them or more in some cases. So this is a great way to focus people in on those pages that we know they're looking for and not say like a meeting agenda that's 20 years old, which some people may be looking for, but probably not many each day. So that's a curated search. You can find this actually on the City of Olympia's website, but also the City of Arcadia, California here, which you'll be able to see. And then final thing I just wanted to show you real quick is you'll have what we call e-notify. This allows you to send notifications to anyone who is subscribed. And that can be through email or through a text message or both. And all folks have to do is type in their email address. They then type in their phone number, and then they choose below what they want to be updated on. And it's really nice on your side of things because you don't have to ask folks to log into an account or anything or create a username and a password. All they have to do is type in their email. They then verify it by hitting a link that we'll send them, and then they're in. And then they can sign up for what they want to be subscribed for, whether it's just a new agenda that's posted or even an emergency alert if you want to use this for that. So obviously there's a lot more that's included. And one of the big things that we pride ourselves on is really customizing each website to fit the needs of each city we work with. So you're not just going to get a cookie cutter website. You are going to get a ton of features that we've already built, and then we'll modify them to fit your needs. But then we're also going to take it that next step and really customize it and get it to something that your community and we, of course, can all be proud of. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or any thing you want me to go into.
Excellent presentation, Thomas. I really appreciate it. Any questions or comments from, Eileen, and then we'll go to Nathan.
Just pure coincidence, I happened to be on the Olympia website this afternoon looking for a rather obscure, kind of buried report, and now that I think about it, it took me a grand total of about 3 clicks. And they passed me over to the link to the Thurston County aspect of the same report, and it was absolutely effortless. I mean, I was just sitting here like going, wow, what a weird coincidence. But yeah, it was truly effortless to find this report on their site.
Okay, Nathan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, great presentation. I've been looking at a couple of your websites and then also reviewing them on my mobile as well, just to make sure that it flows. One of the ones, the one in Alaska, one of the videos was a little stuck on not landscape, on landscape mode. But I think other than that, I mean, all of yours are looking pretty good. I think it's really commendable that you want to make it specific to the city. I'm going to do a little bit more looking, but I appreciate all your work on these.
Thank you.
Okay, Francis?
Thank you. I do have a question related to your platform, because you're talking about all the content that you're creating. Do you have a standard platform that you're building on, or is the platform your platform also?
Sure. So the content management system is our platform. It is built in pure Java, which is a well-known language out there. And then also the front end, so the website the public will see is built with HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, which is like the most common languages that most websites today are built in. So nothing wildly proprietary that another developer wouldn't be able to handle.
Okay, thank you.
Becky?
I love it. I love the video too and how that gives a sense of place. I'm curious, and maybe this is a question for you and Matt, is as we go on and we need to make changes and updates to the website, how easy would that be for us to do?
Sure, I'm happy to show you real quick. So what you're doing, or what you're seeing here, this is our demo site. Your site, of course, will look different, but the editing is very similar. All someone has to do is go to the website, and usually at the bottom we'll have a little button that says login. They'll have a username and a password. We do allow for unlimited users. We train them all. And then each user can have different permissions on what they can edit and where. So as you can see here, you'll see a bunch of different edit buttons across the screen. And very simply, you just click the button that says edit. So if I go to, say, the city manager's page here, and I wanted to make some changes, I would click edit page content. And then say maybe we want to change the photo of the mayor, or excuse me, of the city manager. We could do that. Maybe we have a new city manager. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if we did in this case, we could name them or change their name rather. And then if you wanted to add more photos, you click this little icon. And I'll just throw a random one in here. Click save. There's your photo. Eyes that photo. You can also preview it, so if you want to save it as a draft before it goes live. Otherwise, you can save it, and then it goes live right away. And that is a photo of my cat, if you were wondering. Her name is Hannah. So that's how quick it was. Just added a photo and did a name change right there in 30 seconds. So very easy.
Thank you.
Okay, Megan.
So, Councilmember Becky Dubin just basically asked the same question. So I was concerned about that in terms of how easy it is for staff to be able to do that. I assume you train them on that?
We do. We do full training for anyone who's editing. There's also videos that they can train themselves on, and we give full tech support. And of course, all of our clients are municipal employees and municipal staff, so it's built and maintained with that in mind. Ease
That's
of
great.
use.
And I just want to say, I like what I see, and I like the fact that you're available 24/7, but I really like how clean things look and bringing us up to date in terms of our city representation. The website is so important, and with our new logo, I really think this is what we need to bring everything in alignment and to harmonize. So I like what you're showing us, and yeah.
And I want to thank the committee again, and Matt, thank you very much for getting with Revise here. And I know you went through 14 different presentations to try and find the right one, and obviously from the reaction here, you did a good job. And thanks the committee as well. So, Thomas, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members for having me. And I must also commend the committee. They did a thorough review, and we will make sure that they made the right choice. So we'll make you proud. And if you have any questions, I'm your guy from here on out. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your meeting, and we look forward to working with you.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Next item on the agenda is public comment regarding any final action the city is taking tonight. Is there anyone who would make a public comment on any final action? Okay, with that, I close public comment. Now comes the consent agenda. These items are considered routine nature. The council's had a chance to look these over ahead of time, as well as staff and mayor and all that. So do I have a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Thad O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the April 11, 2023 minutes and approve them as submitted. Item number 2 is a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 110023 through 110081, totaling $254,920.40. The next item is a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 110082 through 110100, electronic transfers 105, 106, 988, and 993 through 998, payroll direct deposits numbered 84290 through 84636, totaling $1,500,487.19. Item 4 is a motion to approve disbursements for UB refund check number 110101 and accounts payable checks numbered 110102 through 110170, totaling $706,358.77. Item 5 is a motion to set May 23, 2023 as the public hearing date to consider Pullman Transit Service adjustments to take effect in August 2023. Item 6, a motion to accept funding from the Sherrod Family Memorial Fund. Item 7, a motion to renew the American Red Cross Emergency Shelter contract. Item 8, a motion to authorize a lodging tax grant of $4,000 to the Pullman Chamber of Commerce for the Three Forks River and Arts Festival occurring May 14 through 28, 2023. And the final item, resolution number R-18-23, a resolution authorizing the submittal of a certified local government grant application to the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation for the purpose of surveying African American populations in Pullman's history.
Is there any item the council would like to offer discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 9. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now move to the regular agenda. The first item is to approve the purchase of a new pumper fire truck, and Ryan Lancaster, our business services manager for M&O, is before us right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your time. So this proposal is to purchase a new pumper fire truck, a Spartan, manufactured through Titan truck. This is to replace an existing pumper truck that we currently have in fleet, number 99002. This rig has served us well for 20 years. It's been in service, and we're recommending it be retired. This new rig, we're anticipating, or the agreement is that it will be delivered within 475 days, which is about a year and 4 months, and considerably quicker than a lot of other manufacturers in the market currently. We're anticipating it will be delivered in Q3, and we'll have it in service next year, by the end of next year. We have proposed this in the 2024 CIP plan, and we'll ensure that appropriate funds have been budgeted for it in the 2024 budget. The fire department, the committee, and myself worked together to develop this proposal. I have to give thanks to Officer Godina and his committee for all the work that they put into it. We took time to evaluate multiple manufacturers to make sure we were looking at our best options and comparing, contrasting, make sure we're getting the best value. And we evaluated things based on not only cost, but production lead time and function as well. We are presenting the Spartan proposal due to its significantly increased lead time. The costs were comparable, within 5% of each other. And so this, we felt, reduced the risk for increased costs due to surcharges and whatnot over a span of potentially 3 years with other manufacturers. It also works well with our maintenance department, as we are well-versed in Spartan fire trucks. The procurement is based on a Sourcewell cooperative contract that is publicly bid and meets all cities' procurement policies. The cost for the fire truck, including tax, is $1,041,388. The city's local, interlocal agreement with Washington State University allows us, they have committed to contribute a certain amount of funds towards apparatus like this. They have committed to contributing $168,704. And we have got confirmation of that commitment. So the net cost to the city is $872,683 when done. ERD, we have looked at our amortization and our ERD rates, and we have the funds to support the purchase. So I have Officer is with us tonight if we have any questions specific to the rig, but I'm happy to answer any questions as far as the procurement process as well, if you have any.
Any questions? Go to Eileen first.
Question for the rank and file. Does this really meet your feeling for safety for our people? Is this truck going to be as safe as you want it to be?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you feel that the safety features on this truck meet what you feel you need?
Yeah, one of the reasons we chose Spartan was that they actually lead the industry in safety for firefighters. They're one of the few that have airbags for front and back of the cab. Along with the independent front suspension that we asked to be in the spec, that allows for safety of handling, especially when you're going down the road at a high rate of speed. And so, yeah, it does. It's one of the key points that we went with. We're leaning towards Spartan.
Very good, thank you.
And it's one of the shortest times, like 400 days or more. The other ones were, what, like years out?
Correct. 2 years for our second runner-up, and that's pretty common. The apparatus industry wasn't so vulnerable to all the supply chain issues, labor issues, equipment issues, so Spartan was one of the few that was with a reasonable amount of time. There was other manufacturers who just flat out stopped taking orders because they were behind, so Spartan was one that was available and met our criteria.
And I realize with inflation, those percentages have really increased because I can remember we were buying pumper trucks for 400,000,
Exactly.
500,000, 600.
Yes.
And the ladder trucks were over $1 million. So now it's the pumper trucks. Okay.
That is correct, yeah.
Thank you for all the work you did on this. Megan?
Just a question, how many pumper trucks do we have?
Currently in our fleet, we have 3 and then a ladder truck.
Okay.
One is the one we're being replaced. It's quite old and it's showing its age.
And that's the one we're replacing?
That's the one we're replacing.
Okay. And so we'll continue using that until this comes?
From my understanding, yes. That's
Okay.
operational.
Got it.
Then does the older one, become a reserve unit for a while?
No, the intent would be to sell the.
Oh, will
the
be,
older one.
okay.
Yep.
Nathan, did you have your hand up? Okay. Anything else? All right, you have a presentation before you. Do I hear a motion on this?
Move to approve the purchase of a new pumper fire truck.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And now we'll wait our 400+ days before we can have the rolling out ceremony. Okay. Item number 2 is a memorandum of understanding on the opioid abatement council, and Mike Urban, our city administrator, is on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So in the past several months, City Council has authorized settlement agreements with various opioid manufacturers and distributors. And as part of these agreements, local governments are required to participate in an opioid abatement council for oversight and reporting of spending of the allocated settlement funds. So specifically, one of the councils that was set up by the Washington piece that was originally approved is the Greater Columbia Opioid Abatement Council, which consists of 9 counties, neighboring counties, and 10 cities in those counties that were eligible for receiving opioid settlement dollars. So the groups got together and came up with how would this opioid council work. There's been a lot of discussion among several of the officials. It has been very well attended over the last several months, and we've carved out an agreement that seems to be agreeable to a lot of the city attorneys and the county prosecutors who act as the attorneys for the county commissioners. So that's what this agreement is before you tonight. As you will see, the Abatement Council is asking us to hold back 10% of the settlement to cover the costs, but as our group has been talking about it specifically, we believe that 10% is way too high, but in getting it up and running the first year, everybody feels that's very safe. As the years go on, it's just going to be a lot of posting and keeping the website up, making sure everything's maintained properly. And the discussion was that we believe that the full operational expense is going to be less than $10,000 for each year going on, and how we would pay for that is each of the members, each of these 19 members that join, based on their pro rata share of the settlements, would pay the same percentage of whatever that outstanding cost is. So it's not the full cost divided by 19. Larger counties like Benton County would pay a higher proportionate share than we would. So the other piece about this is that each local jurisdiction would retain full access to the settlement funds unless they wanted to turn it over to the Opioid Abatement Council. That's not something we're proposing at this point, but as things go along, staff is going to be working police, fire, to come up with a recommendation to the city council as to what our spending plan would be, so we can bring that back to you sometime in the early third quarter for approval. We have received one small payment right now because all those dollars are set to be paid over multiple years. I think the first one was 17 years. So it's not like we've received a large lump of money all at once. So we still would be able to maintain the control over how those dollars are spent locally. The council did create an Exhibit A as a feature, kind of an aggregation of all the settlements, so it's kind of very easy for the users to look at and say, when we're creating our plans, oh, this is something that this is allowed. So Exhibit A wasn't created by the group of folks that have been meeting on Zoom. It's just pulled right out of the agreements that we've already signed, so we make sure we spend those dollars properly. So if the council does approve authorizing the mayor to enter into this MOU, staff is requesting that city council name a representative to the OAC to help legislate and make sure that the OAC is performing as it's supposed to. And that is one of the things we put in this MOU, where every organization gets one person on the board. Some counties have selected their county treasurer to be on that. Some cities have selected their city manager, but a lot have selected elected officials, so I wanted to make sure that would be part of this discussion as well. So with that, staff recommends that the council authorize them to sign the MOU as presented, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this? And they don't have to make that decision as to who the representative is tonight, but they can talk about it if they want to.
No, I think in the next 90 days or so, if we had that answer, it'd be
great.
really, really great.
Okay. So with that, do I hear a motion on this memorandum?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Memorandum of Understanding between the Greater Columbia Region municipalities to establish an opioid abatement council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, council.
Thank you very much for that. Now comes a discussion item. And it's Kara Haley's our city engineer, talking about resurfacing for 2023, bicycles, and parking constraints.
Oh, yes,
Well, you
we-
took on a lot of topics tonight here.
We have a very fun discussion ahead, I think. So thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I'm really glad to be here tonight to talk to you guys about our Arterial Streets Resurfacing 2023 project. Tonight's focus is on proposed bicycle facilities and then parking constraints that would go along with those. So first, I'm going to give a little bit of a project background for you guys just to kind of set the stage. So the main focus of this project is actually roadway resurfacing, and under it, we would resurface about 0.91 miles of arterial streets. The yellow hatch on that figure up on the board conveys the rough limits of that work. You can see that we're up in apartment land. We're looking at addressing Merman from Terraview Drive to Westwood Drive, and Westwood Drive from Merman Drive to Northwood Drive. So it gets kind of wordy in there, but that's where we're at. The project also includes several complete streets considerations. If you recall, in March of 2020, the City of Pullman adopted a complete streets policy. At its heart, the policy aims to ensure that city transportation-related capital projects are implemented with all potential types of users in mind. Really, the goal is to plan, design, and ultimately build streets in a way that enables and promotes safe access to all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. In line with this policy, I will highlight several complete streets features that have been designed and incorporated into this project. So the first focuses on pedestrian travel. The project will upgrade 7 existing curb ramps to be ADA compliant. In addition, 3 brand-new curb ramps will be constructed along the route. On the screen, there's a star roughly at those locations. We also are able to install 2 new bus pullouts. So this is a heavily used bus route. Actually, when you talk to transit, I think a bus comes through here once every 6 minutes. Most of the bus traffic tends to travel presently in the westbound direction around a loop, but there is a route, I believe, that also goes in the eastbound direction. Lastly, the project design considers bicyclists and proposes adding striped bike lanes to both sides of the streets to be resurfaced. Of course, I have the asterisk up there because this will require restricting parking on the streets. And so it really depends on what you guys want to do and the direction that you want to with tonight. So I want to provide a little bit of information about bicycle design. So when it comes to designing bike facilities, it's really helpful to have an understanding of the types of bicyclists. Research shows that a large segment of the population, approximately 51%, would be willing to ride a bike if they felt safer and more comfortable to do this. This is essentially called your interested but concerned group. How do I get this laser pointer to work? Maybe I have to, okay. There we go. I think I got it. So that's right here, this 51 to 56% interested but concerned group. For this group, greater separation from motor vehicles and slower speed environments are among the attributes that contribute to these folks feeling safe and more willing to ride a bike. Highly confident people make up about 4 to 7% of bicyclists, and they're really comfortable in any type of environment, sharing the road with vehicles. And then you have this 5 to 9% group that's the somewhat confident. They're pretty comfortable on most streets, but there's a few situations where they might not feel very comfortable. And then you also have the 31 to 37% really not able or interested, regardless of what kind of facility you might put in. So there are several bikeway treatments and strategies that exist to specifically accommodate bikers. The second figure shows a range of these. There's others, but this is kind of the overall gist. The quality of the selected bikeway type directly impacts the level of comfort roadway users experience when traveling, thereby influencing the number of people who would consider riding a bicycle along that street. When designing bicycle facilities, best practice recommends targeting the interested but concerned group. The highly confident, somewhat confident, they already feel pretty good on most facilities. So with that approach, you capture, hopefully, most of the people who would ride a bike. So staff utilized multiple publications and bicycle design guides to select bike lanes as the most appropriate bikeway for both Mermin and Westwood. Where's my sheet? Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more context on how we did that. So I'm sharing with you a facility selection chart, which comes from the Federal Highway Administration's 2019 Bikeway Selection Guide. So this chart is applicable to urban and suburban contexts and was developed with the interested but concerned bicyclists in mind. And you can see that it's based primarily on motor vehicle speeds as well as traffic volumes. Oops, I went the wrong way, excuse me. So the speed on both Mermin and Westwood is 25 miles per hour. So you see that red line that just popped up. When we look at Westwood, so ADT is average daily traffic. And we did do traffic counts in late 2021, and we got a traffic count of 3,172 on Westwood. And on Mermin, not horribly surprising, but the ADT goes up to 6,372. Oops, I actually don't want to go that far yet. So where those lines intersect, you can see that for Westwood, we're really just beyond the point where a shared roadway would be most applicable. A shared roadway would be maybe like sharrows on the street, so you'd be sharing the lane with vehicles. We're actually right up into the very bottom part of that lightly blue shaded area, which is really where bike lanes apply. And then Merman also falls into this same category of bike lane being the preference, although it is at the upper end, as you can see. So, a few other statistics. This chart that I showed with the graph, it's fairly in line with these recommendations, but these are some of the other kind of just standard practice you can get out of other guides. So bike lanes are applicable typically on 3 lanes of traffic or fewer. We have 2 lanes in this case. You want to be no more than 30 miles per hour, so we're good there, and then up to about 7,500 ADT. The other thing about bike lanes is they're really pretty typical on streets with high transit vehicle volume, which is the situation that we're at here. I'm going to revert back to the shared roadway real quick. You can see speed limits more like 25 miles per hour and up to 3,000 ADT. And they're really not recommended with heavy traffic because you don't want the buses and the bikes trying to share that lane, especially when they come by every 6 minutes. So, give me a second here. Okay, so once the bikeway type was selected, design can focus on other site constraints and considerations. So by far our biggest constraint here is the existing roadway width, which is 30 feet. And that's for both Merman and Westwood. I did give you a picture of Westwood just because the orientation of this location looked good, and it also had a car parked on the street. So it's a good illustration. Let me see here. Oh, I do clarify that the 30 feet is really the asphalt pavement width. So there's a curb and gutter on both sides of the street. The typical gutter will take up 1.5 feet, which is the case here. So the 30 feet is really the asphalt width. So we recognize that on-street parking is important, right? So we did first analyze, can we put in bike lanes or a bike lane and still maintain that parking? So we do have some width constraints, which I'm going to talk through, but let's look at the car that's parked up there that we talked about. If I can point, I'm sure we can all see the car. But typical design for the width of a parking lane is 8 feet. That's for a standard vehicle. That's what I would recommend in this case. 7.5 feet wide is for compact spaces. In this case, that's a half a difference. But you can see that 8 feet. So I do have 6.5 feet up there. That's because you can actually use the 1.5 feet of gutter in that computation. So we have 6.5 feet that we need to reserve next to the gutter to accommodate parking. So when it comes to vehicle lanes, I mentioned that transit uses this route very heavily. We actually have some flexibility in lane widths on different routes, but the transit's really what our minimum constraint is. So we had talked to transit. We know what our bus widths are, and we know that really we can't go less than 11 feet for each vehicle lane here. So that's 22 feet total. And you can see all that we have left is about 1.5 feet of pavement that, you can't expect a bicyclist to ride in the 1.5 feet. What I will add is that all of the technical guidance is typically that the minimum bike lane width would be 4 feet. So we're about 2.5 feet short, even if you swap parking on one side and whatnot. I'm going to go back to a blank slate here, and I'm going to show you kind of this other option that I'm talking about, which is bike lanes. So these yellow lines convey generally what our design lays out. We've got 4 feet bike lanes. That's from the edge of the gutter to the center line of the stripe. We have that 8 feet. We have that 1.5 feet. So we still have the 22 feet in the middle that needs to be reserved for bicyclists. For that total 30-foot width. So you can see we can barely squeeze in 4-foot lanes on each side. 4 foot's actually, I think it's very applicable in this case. I think it will be very comfortable. A lot of jurisdictions, when they have space, will actually go wider. I will add when we talk about bike lanes, so you have a longitudinal stripe, really the whole route of the road, and then you also have bicycle symbols that get installed periodically as well as signage that needs to go along with it. So the approximate cost for the bicycle facilities on this project is $80,000. I did update this number a little bit from what I put in the staff report. I'll explain it later, but we did have bids come in on the project, so that's why we're at $80,000. So now that you guys have a little look into the design, initial feedback in regards to the bike lane concept was achieved in alignment with the Complete Streets policy, which requires the city engineer to touch bases and seek input from two groups. The first is an internal staff committee. It's comprised of the city engineer, the planning director, the parks and facilities director, a representative from transit, and a representative from M&O. So that meeting in regards to this project was held on January 9th, 2023. And then the Complete Streets policy, as written, also requires seeking periodic input from the city CIP-TIP committee, so the Capital Improvement Program Committee. And that was done on February 26, 2023. A link to that meeting agenda and all of the information was provided in the council packet. So overall, both groups were supportive of the bike lane concept, but acknowledged the possibility for removal of on-street parking to affect some residents and, of course, potentially be controversial. So you guys thought you were going to have a short meeting, and you have to hear from me. So on-street parking. So let's talk about the parking now a little bit, because I want to focus on that. So the existing condition is that parking is allowed on one side only. And you could see from that first figure that we went through with the shadings that there's only enough room for one side to park safely. The side in which parking takes place actually varies. It's a little hard to see on this screen, but I did draw lines on the figure on the side of the street that parking is allowed. I do alternate the colors, and I'll get into that later. That goes along with the parking study and the different segments that were broken out. But on Merman Drive, for the first portion, when you're traveling northward, you can park on the west side. Once you reach Skyview, it switches to the east side, and then you turn the corner to Westwood, and you're allowed to park on only the south side. So I mentioned a parking study. A memorandum was provided in your council packet. It had a lot of numbers. Sorry. I'll try and break it down a little bit. The parking study was completed in November and early December of last year by our interns. They went out to the site on 16 different occasions at varying times of day and also different varying days of the week. What we found, part of that process, the first thing I asked them to do was get an inventory of how much vehicles could legally park on street, right? You know, there's some limitations where you have driveway entrances. Obviously, you can't park in front of a driveway entrance or a bus stop or a fire hydrant. So they took that into account, and they told me that we have 162 available legal spaces. These first stats are going to be for basically both streets as a whole. So the overall average occupancy is 11.2%. That's 18 spaces out of 162. And then I put the range because I think it's helpful to know like what was the minimum amount of cars parked there total and what was the maximum. And it was 9 to 30. So that actually equates to a 6% to 19% occupancy. So if you add up all the cars that were there on the day where there was the least or the time, it was 9. And then the most that we saw parked along this whole segment on a visit was 30. So I debated if you guys wanted to see the specific data and numbers for this, and I went ahead and put it in. I think I can actually breeze through it pretty quickly, but it does help kind of convey to you the parking situation along different segments. So segment 1, there's 6 available spaces, and the average occupancy was 5.2%. That's really less than 1 space. And parking was only observed there on 2 visits. And on those 2 visits, 1 visit there were 2 spaces occupied, and 1 there were 3. All the other visits, there was no cars. Section 2, and hopefully you can see up there, I tried to make it yellow so you can see where we're talking about, has 14 spaces, had a 13.8% average occupancy, which is approximately 2 spaces, and it had an occupancy range of 0 to 5. So It was unoccupied for 2 visits, so 2 times it had 0, and then the other times it ranged between 0 and 5. Section 3 is where you get up around the corner near Birch Hills. It has 28 spaces, 12.1% average occupancy, which is approximately 3 spaces, and the occupancy range was 2 to 6. So we did, every time we went out there, there was at least 2 vehicles, and maximum there was 6. Section 4, 37 spaces, 13.9% average occupancy, which is about 5 spaces. So we're seeing a little more numbers. Occupancy range was 2 to 8. So again, there were always at least 2 vehicles, and the maximum trip had 8. Section 5 has 32 spaces, 1.8% average occupancy, which is less than 1. And it was actually unoccupied for 7 visits. And on the other 9 visits, there was only 1 car parked in that whole segment. Section 6, 7 spaces, 9.8% average occupancy, less than 1 space. Parking was only observed here on 3 visits, and those 3 visits, there was 1 car the first time, or I don't know, I want to say the first, but that one of those times, 3 another time, and 7 another time. Otherwise, it was unoccupied. Segment 7 had 13 spaces available, 16.4% average occupancy, approximately 2 spaces, and it had a range of 0 to 5, and on 6 of those visits, there was nobody there. Section 8, 8 spaces, 30.5% occupancy, which is about 2 to 3 spaces, and again, ranged from 0 to 8, was unoccupied for 4. And Section 9, promise we're almost done. The last 3 are quick. 12 spaces, 13.5% average occupancy, which I have 1 to 2 spaces because it was really like 1.5 if you do the math. The occupancy range was 0 to 3, and on 3 of the visits, it was unoccupied. And 10, 11, and 12, we didn't observe any cars there at any time. We got our data. We're engineers. We like to crunch numbers. But then we thought, let's do some outreach outside of the folks that we had already talked to, and let's reach out to some of the property managers along Merman and Westwood. So the Cougar Ridge Apartments, the College Crest Apartments, and the Cougar Crest Apartments, which hopefully you can see up there in green, I chatted with them, and they didn't express any concerns associated with removing on-street parking in favor of bike lanes. We did not contact Retreat at Pullman, and we did not contact any of the complexes adjacent to the parking sections 10, 11, and 12, but we didn't feel like that was very warranted based off of the parking data that we'd already collected. But I feel like I'll throw that in there just so you're aware. I'm just going to go to my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. Got an extra one in here. Okay, so the Wheat Ridge condominiums shown in orange, and I guess on the previous slide I wanted you to see where that was at. That's kind of right on the bend. But if we zoom in to a closer view, you can see that this complex is really 4 different buildings with 40 units total. There are 2 and 3 bedroom units, and there's 109 bedrooms total, and that's based off of our I pulled the 1993 site plan that was approved for this complex, so unless they've remodeled or changed it, that's what I believe it should be. Each unit is separately owned, which is a little different than some of these apartment complexes, so each unit is owned by somebody different. The property manager was really helpful, and he explained to me that tenants can rent parking spaces if they own vehicles. They're not allotted a specific stall that they can park in, but they can park in any of the 4 different lots that are on site. Doesn't quite look like there's 4, but I'll point them out to you if I can get my pointer working. There we go. So there's a lot here, 1 here, there's a little tiny lot here, and then of course you have this long lot right here. It's really a first come, first served basis is my understanding. So we talked for a little bit, and definitely, the takeaway was that Building D would most likely be affected if you were to remove on-street parking. You can see that it's removed from the really large parking lot. It has a lot in front of it. In fact, even when we look at this image, you can see quite a bit more cars in that lot than in the other lot. So removing on-street parking here, actually, and you can see a few cars parked out on street in front, even the cars that park in that closest lot, it's actually like a shorter distance if you park on street to get to some of the front doors. So a lot of the residents opt to park there presently. Removing on-street parking would require them, if that small lot is full, to park in one of the other lots and walk further. So that would be the primary impact for this complex. This one's a little interesting than some of our others. I mentioned the site plan was approved in 1993. This meets 1987 zoning code for parking in a multifamily residential complex. And at that time, what that meant for this complex, which had 2 and 3 bedroom units, was you had to construct 2 stalls per each 2 and 3 bedroom unit. So they provided 81. They have 80. I guess I didn't give you the number. They have 80. No, I thought I did. For building. Oh, yeah, 40 units times 2. Excuse me. So they have 81 provided. Now, current zoning code actually would require 109 parking stalls, and that just across the board is 1 stall per bedroom. So this is one particular complex where it falls under an older zoning code. The newer zoning code has been in effect, at least the 1 stall per bedroom, since 2003. So additional feedback, we did have a few complexes that are generally not in support of removing on-street parking. Those are shown in red. Pine Ridge Apartments, Maple Valley Apartments, Cedar Point, and Birch Hills Apartments. Actually, I'm going to go back. So we really had one point of contact for these properties. That was Carrie Jo with Corporate Point Developers. She was really helpful. And she was really our mediator in that she reached out directly to the various property owners and really reported the findings back to us. So a special thanks to her. She was very helpful. So some of the concerns, really, the current parking policy for all 4 of these complexes shown in red is that on-site parking is reserved solely for tenants. So with that, guests are directed to park on adjacent public streets, so Westwood, Merman, and Northwood. Some of the other specific concerns that they had, so this makes sense, and I believe this to be the case. There are some students who are likely not residents of the area, but they drive their vehicles and they park on like Westwood and Northwood, and they take transit because it's a free parking space all day. And there's lots of transit stops, and the buses come every 6 minutes, so it's very convenient. So some students have gotten very smart, and they do that. So one of the concerns that Carrie Jo expressed was that they're thinking if you remove parking, some of those non-resident park and ride students may move into their complexes to park, so making it harder for their residents. And then, on top of that, now they potentially have a burden to enforce on-site parking. I will say, let's see. So right up here, so there's this kind of dead-end segment of Merman presently. So parking's allowed on both sides of the street there. We're not planning to remove that in any way. So that would remain a location that folks could park on street and still take the transit routes. Northwood, we can talk about this later if there's time or it makes sense, is a little bit wider, and there's actually parking allowed on both sides of the street right here, right now as well. So that's another location where folks could go. There's actually 11 transit stops along this route. If I guess it would have been nice to show them up there for you, but. And then again, we talked about guest parking no longer available within the public right-of-way. So that would require a shift potentially to their policy or resolving it in some other fashion. I noted the previous zoning code, and I did check with site plans and when these were constructed, and all 4 of these complexes do meet the current zoning code. So they have a 1-to-1 ratio of bedroom to parking. When the after the interns did a first stab at the memo, we also had them kind of do a quicker assessment, and they did drive through some of the parking lots and found that, generally there were a lot of open spaces. Let's see, Wheat Ridge condominiums, at least that one lot, some of those lots was an exception. But there did seem to be quite a few spaces available. Lastly, so one other thing that Carrie Jo pointed out was Cedar Point, and it's really the complex on the southeast corner of the intersection of Westwood and Mermin. So I zoomed in on that for you. So she noted that the front doors face Mermin Drive. So I put a picture down there. You can see there's kind of yellow at the front of the picture. There's actually yellow striping on the far end when you get closer to the intersection. But some people do park along this segment, and it is a, guests, I think, would use this commonly, and it provides very close access to the front doors. The parking lot that goes along with this facility is actually around back off Westwood Drive. And so, they are concerned about access to the front doors, especially for guests or tenants with reduced mobility. So if they did allow guests, right now they only allow guests on street, but say they allowed guests into the parking lot, potentially a guest may have to walk up and around to access the front door. Here's a street view of that back lot. You can see there's garages, so there's actually parking in the buildings as well for the tenants. But this gives you a view of what I'm talking about if you had to park in that lot and walk up and around the corner. So we are almost done. I want to give a little bit more context into the project and the timeline. So this project is federally funded. The grant agreement covers 86.5% of project costs, up to a maximum of $1,650,000 to $100,000. Let's see if I say that right. 150, 1.6 roughly. And because it's a federal project, there's a lot of reporting, a lot of documentation, and a lot of approvals that need to go into the process. So this was in the staff report, but staff did elect to seek bids and obtain design approvals on this project with inclusion of the bike lanes, because WashDOT does look at those. They had comments. To add those in later is, would potentially cause things to be much slower and require potentially significant more approvals later on. The bid opening for this project was actually today. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert that the results were pretty favorable. They were in line with the budget and the engineer's estimate. We have sent the different proposals off to WashDOT. We do have to await their concurrence to award, but we're hopeful to request award of the contract at the May 9th council meeting, if we get that concurrence. The approximate construction time frame, it's 90 working days, so that's weekdays and not holidays. If the timeline that I've kind of laid out works, that would be construction from June through early to mid-October. So, let's see. We really, I wish we had more options in terms of trying to provide for parking while also provide for bicycle facilities. But staff has three suggested options to consider. The first is to install the bike lanes, and with that, we have to restrict all on-street parking. If we went this route, staff would prepare an associated resolution for a future council meeting. I expect, we'd have the ability to include language allowing the on-street parking to continue until the bike lanes are installed and signage is in place. So, you can't install the bike lanes until you do paving. So that will fall a little bit later in the project. So the first, we're proposing to do this project in 2 phases, first on Mermin and then on Westwood. So, you have quite a bit of time for additional work, roadway excavation, concrete work, and things in place before you really even have to, before you'd actually put the signs up and you'd actually restrict parking along those locations. With this, we would proceed with the project design as presently prepared. The second option is, prioritizes on-street parking, and it maintains essentially the current status quo. And with this, we would remove the proposed bike lanes from the project. It wouldn't be too difficult to do at this venture. We'd probably have to do a future change order to remove the associated work from the contract. I noted I think that would be about $80,000 worth of work based on the apparent low bid. And then the other, is really based on your guys' discussion, input, direction. Maybe you have another option. I feel like we vetted about as much of it as we can, and it's always a hard decision to take away parking. And so, anyways, we're really seeking direction and input from you. We can go any route at this point. There's absolutely no reason that we have to go with the bike lanes. And then, of course, we certainly could. There's just trade-offs. So I don't want to speak to this too much now. We'll just see where the discussion heads and we can come back to it. At the end of the staff report, there was a additional paragraph about if option 1 is selected. We have some thoughts about extending bicycle facilities on Northwood. I will say Northwood is 5 feet wider in roadway width. So when we were looking at that 1.5 foot constraint, what we would propose on Northwood in the future, and it wouldn't be done under this project, we don't have the funding or the mechanism, but it could be done by city forces or done on another project, would be recommending a bike lane on one side, maintain parking on the other side, and then you'd put sharrows in the downhill direction. So that's actually, because you have a little bit more roadway width here, that works. So if option 1 were selected, our recommendation with that would be to also look at putting together a resolution that accounts for that. And I will open it up for questions. Sorry, that was a lot of
Becky, we'll start with you.
Kara, thank you so much for this detailed report, both in the items we got in our packet and then what you've presented today. I know you've spoken with me and with Carrie Jo and others this week. You've put a tremendous amount of time in here. I always enjoy when your items come up because so much good, juicy stuff to dig into. And I love the complete streets. I wasn't on council when that was passed, but were it to come up, I would vote for it. I think it's a really good idea. I'm just concerned that this isn't the right time for this particular area of town. When I think about, for example, the students who live in that area, if you and I were to rent an apartment there, we share a 2-bedroom apartment, we have 2 parking spaces. None others are allowed for guests in that parking space. If we were to have guests over, that would be really difficult. And I'm not sure we would be considering this in any other place in town, eliminating off-street parking for bike lanes. What would that be like for each of us in our residences if we had no off-street parking, no guests could come by? I looked at your numbers, so impressed, the number of visits and the way you prepared that. And I noticed, for example, on a Monday morning that there were about 20 cars out there on one particular morning. And I just wonder a couple of things. First, where those 20 cars would go. I'm thinking 22 to 30 people, something like that. Where would they park? If there are guests coming over, and let's switch it to the evening, and maybe we only have a couple people coming over, and they cannot park near where we live, that's forcing them to park out farther away and walk back at a time when I think the general community is not feeling safe. That concerns me. Think about like family weekend. If, okay, now we decide we're going to go back to school and our families come to visit and want to crash out our place because rooms are really hard to find, where would they park? How would we manage that? I'm assuming that development is going to continue in that area. I'm curious, Kara, will the streets then be wider? Will we now then require wider streets?
Traditionally, it will depend, but yes, I'd have to go back and look at what was required at this time. It depends on the expected functional classification of the street. This is actually pretty narrow for Pullman. We have much wider streets where you can do parking on both sides.
It's such a disappointment. I would be so celebrating if we could have parking on one side and a bike on the other. We would be on our way home if that were true. I just think this is not the right time. Like, maybe in a future date, we come back and put bike lanes in. Awful when we have a grant. I know, I love 86.5% off as much as anybody. But right now, for those students, I'm concerned about their experience. That is in Nathan and my ward. And I have heard from more than one person talking about where do we go? How do we manage that? So there's a few issues there. And also the bus. I personally have no problem. When I think about the parking that's shrinking and the number of permits we're doing because people are kind of infiltrating neighborhoods. I know we have parking spot, at least one bus stop out there that has some parking spots a little off street for that. And that I've been told some residents even drive a car out to the bus, near the bus stop. My concern about putting bike lanes in, like, those would be good for 3 months, a year, as we get into some of the worse weather. And I guess what I'm going to do is just pause, just tap the brakes right now, and let those students have what every other citizen in this, but pretty much most of us have in this city, is some off-street parking, and see how that development goes, and we can always come back and add those bike lanes.
I can tell you that middle area is under construction now. I guess I got to point at this. This is the annex, so that's going in presently. Couple things when you just stand out there and look at it, that's a giant hill. So when you look at this figure, there's a lot of topography going on. You're going all the way up a hill. We have our water towers out Skyview Drive, or water tanks, excuse me, High Point. Even the annex complex, parking on streets a pretty hefty walk to the middle of the annex complex, and then also back up to the top of the hill. And then also, I would add, this is a huge complex. I drove through it this morning myself again. There's actually no sidewalk. Like, if you park a car here as a guest, the only way you can walk in, this is a hillside down, is to walk down the street. There's not actually a sidewalk. And then, this is 500 feet in here to the interior of this complex. I think it would be cool if the policy was changed to allow guests to park inside the complex. I know that definitely puts a burden on them. But, these big complexes do have, not every student has a car. So I don't know if they're all being utilized. I guess I would question if there's availability in the complexes for the guests. But I don't know. That's just...
Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kara, thank you so much. I really appreciate the data, because for me, that helps me quite a bit. I'm kind of a nerd that way. But I was actually really surprised at, and I appreciate what Becky was saying, because I was kind of surprised at how little parking on street was actually going on for such a huge area. I do agree with Becky that I would feel like if it would be possible to have one side, west side or whatever, have on-street parking, and then biking on the east side. I'm not sure if that's possible with the project, because there are, even though I understand a lot of the younger generation, like when I was growing up, cars were the thing. You go, you get your license, you're on the road, everybody has to have a car. Now, that's not necessarily the case. So I actually do feel like some of those interior spots, one of my buddies lived at Maple Valley, not all the spots were being used. And when I hiked around the exterior of the Magpie Forest up there, I could see that not all the spots were being used. But I do understand some of the other spots might be used. So anyways, long story short, I don't know if it's possible to put it on one side. And then another question I had was, So when I think about biking, I'm one of those guys that I'm okay with biking. There's some scary situations. You know, when I was over in Utrecht, Netherlands, they had specific on the totally away from the traffic.
Yeah.
So you were protected from the traffic, and so everybody biked or walked. It was miles and miles. But there were also locations, so downtown was directly linked to, for instance, the university. And right now, when we're looking at this, it's a section of Merman, which then gets a little crazy as you get down into Valley. And then my thought would be Northwood would be a better one to start on to create a link into the WSU type of area, because I could see people, instead of going to Merman, they would instead go Northwood to North Fairway and then go up into that area, which seems a little bit safer. I've biked around Merman, I've biked around Valley. It's not exactly as friendly. Anyways, those are just some thoughts. The other thing I did have a question about, and this is probably on into the future, but we see a lot of the hoverboards, we see a lot of these other types of transportation. Now, maybe this is something we can look at as a council. How is that going to be dealt with? Are those going to be shared by bike lanes? I know when I'm walking around, hoverboards coming by, I mean, darn near run me over and my dog. And so I'm not sure, maybe that's something we'll have to deal with at a future time. So anyways, those were my thoughts.
If it's all right, if I can get there, I do have a little bit of information. So you mentioned you've been to places. Absolutely, if you have space, you're able to do it. A shared use path, totally removed, you know, with as much separation as possible is the best thing you could put in to encourage people to ride bikes, especially as volume goes up. So when we look at this figure, actually I'm going to put, you know, Merman's at the top. It's not completely out of it. But as you get into those higher ranges, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, a separated shared use path is absolutely the preferred approach when you get higher into those volumes. I did run a couple of numbers because I thought it would be interesting. So here's this. You asked, if you want to talk about, okay, we're constrained because this is an existing road, it's got existing curb and gutter, but let's say, and there's probably some constraints that might kibosh this, but just in a perfect world, let's say we're 2.5 feet short of being able to get the 4-foot bike lane on one side and keep the parking. So I crunched a couple of numbers. So let's just assume that you can widen one side of the street, not jump around or do, you know, 1.75 on one side and 1.75 on the other. Let's just assume that we revamp one side and pull it out. So we probably do have the right of way. We'd be looking at really 0.9 miles of new curb and gutter, $313,000, 0.9 miles of new 6-foot wide sidewalk, $335,000. You also have additional asphalt to put back down. That's not as much, about $35,000. Once you're doing all that work, it adds up. So that's $684,000 to think about. And it'd probably be a similar option if you did like a shared use path and you kept the curb and gutter and you widened the road. You know, you'd be redoing all of that. The other thing that's just really, really cursory, because even as I look up here, there's stormwater ponds, there's hills. You look at pushing it back, you've got grading, you've got landscape restoration, you've got utility adjustments. You also have to account for mobilization. I mean, I think you'd be in the $800,000 range, quite honestly, which is, you know, 10 times the cost of what we're talking about to still see a nice improvement in terms of bicycle facilities. So it's a great question. I'd love that we could do that. You all know that our street fund, you know, we need to be wise with our money and use it as well as we can. So I had that. You had a comment. I thought I wrote it down. The different types of vehicles, I think that's probably something council would have to look at, like you suggested, as those types of features get used even more. And then your second one, I'm now spacing on what your second question was, so I guess I'm not going to be able, can you remember what that one?
The one side, as Becky kind of mentioned, one side having parking and then one side on the bike. For instance,
Oh,
having west side parking all around.
Yes, I
instead
think
of
your
just-
other one was actually Northwood, and I will comment on that.
Oh, yeah.
If I can find the right slide. That's the one problem about all these animations. They get a little painful. Okay, so you are absolutely right. So we just put in a new roundabout at Fairway and Terraview. There's little on and off bicycle ramps associated with that. University Crossing to the south, the big development there, they're putting in a path along the east side of Fairway. So that's going to connect up to campus really nice. As you continue on Fairway, I think there's quite a few bike lanes on campus. So that's a direct link. Next year, with our Complete Streets funding, actually, for our past project, we are looking at putting a shared use path on the south side of Terraview from the roundabout all the way over to Merman. So another direct link. Plus, as you continue down Terraview, on one of our sidewalks projects a few years ago, it's not a shared use path, but we widened the sidewalk along a good section of Terraview on the south side. With that past project, we're talking about a rectangular rapid flashing beacon as you get a little further down near, there's the storage units there, to cross over from that widened sidewalk to where there's path along Terraview as you go past SEL. So, I mean, there's a lot of direct links here, plus you have path that goes all the way out Terraview to Airport Road, connects all the way up with the highway. So I think it provides an important link, an important path. I didn't get into the weeds on Northwood. We don't have planned to resurface Northwood anytime soon. The best price that we get is obviously doing this when we resurface a project. I think Northwood is potentially something our city forces probably could do and connect that last link.
I was just thinking about the customer base of the people who are up there in those apartments are going to be students.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily going to be going to SEL.
Yeah.
They're going to be going to campus.
But I think got that through
the-
Fairway, like you suggested.
But doing the Merman, then it would go into Valley Road. Valley Road is not
I
necessarily.
actually think Valley Road has no parking on both sides.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And it's not striped that way right now, but my long-term mind, we already don't have parking there. You could probably stripe bike lanes and narrow the road on Valley. I mean, and then I guess Orchard would be a connection around from that point. So that's a little further off, but if we're thinking long-term, I think these pieces would all play together.
Yeah, I think, I'm just trying to say,
Yeah, great.
when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about
Campus.
the actual end destination
Yeah.
compared to the start destination.
Absolutely,
So-
absolutely. That's great.
Eileen?
If we went with option one, the remaining on-street parking in those locations that you mentioned that are a little bit more out of the way, not terribly much more out of the way, refresh my memory as to what the parking regulations are on those streets. Is it 24 hours, but the car needs to be moved?
It's just your regular on-street parking, as far as I'm aware. I'm talking about Northwood.
Yeah.
And of course, here up on the screen, Northwood, it's not developed over here, so at some point that'll get developed. This is annexed,
At the
but
present time, you can park overnight on
yes,
those
but it would
streets.
fall,
Yeah,
I don't want to get the wrong day. It would fall to the typical needs to be moved every, I want to say, 5 days. I'm looking at RJ. He should know that. I should know that. It's that short time frame where it has to be moved.
Right.
So it would fall under that. Same with the segment of, Merman, that dead end segment.
So overnight guests could utilize those areas that you
They
described?
could.
Yeah.
They could. And then again, I guess you have to bear the question, is every parking stall for the complexes being used for the residents? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Francis?
Thank you. And a couple questions to follow. One has to do with our Complete Streets ordinance. It's really focused on how do we make sure there's equitable access for all modes of transportation when we're doing street designs, making sure there's safe and equitable access for all those. Within our Complete Streets design, how is parking addressed in it? Because I don't see parking addressed in our complete streets.
I don't think it's included in there at
So,
all.
so complete streets doesn't say that parking is a consideration that we should be taking into this, but our consideration needs to be on equitable access for individuals that are wanting to travel on the streets for all modes of access.
Yeah, I think it's pretty silent in its current form on actual parking. But obviously, we acknowledge it's
That we
a
acknowledge
tough-
there's a safety aspect that's kind of being addressed here. Because, and the reason, and I ask this, but, you know, all the feedback that I've received from residents have been very ecstatic that we're considering this and putting the bicycle in. I didn't have anyone approach me and saying that they were concerned about the lack of parking. It was, all the comments were the other direction, that they were glad that the city was considering the people that wanted to do transportation mode around bicycle, and that we were looking for a safe way for them to be able to travel on these streets. And I was involved in the CIP process, and so we had this discussion in the CIP side with it. So I like the design. I do also appreciate what was brought up now related to parking, which wasn't part of our discussion in the CIP process.
Right.
Becky?
Yes, I just wanted to say that opposite of Councilmember Benjamin, my experience has been that when this was brought up, I had constituents approach me with concerns about parking, and not one, I've not heard from a single constituent asking me when we're going to get bike lanes in there. When we drove through, my husband and I drove through there a couple times in the past 24 hours, I didn't even see anyone walking on the sidewalk. Like, I just didn't see it. And there was plenty of room if someone wanted to ride a bike on a sidewalk, something like that. Is that ideal? No, absolutely not. But I think right now, as Pullman faces more and more restrictions, it's so ironic. Everyone complains about parking downtown, and I have no idea what they're talking about. But out in the neighborhoods, it tends to be a real issue. And we don't know how that development will go. If there are vacant spots within the apartment complexes' parking lots, those, my understanding, are still up for purchase. Like, if you would like to park there, I don't know how well they're like regulated. I don't know how well they're watched. But what we do know is that there is, although it is small, those spots are, some of those spots are being used. And you know, as you and I said on the phone, if you did a study in front of my house, how often that parking is used, there'd be a bike lane in 5 seconds flat, like it would go. So I just wanted to add that. My feedback has been the opposite.
I question on federal money. Sometimes you have a condition that you must have bike lanes to go for complete. If we don't have bike lanes, do we still qualify for the amount of money?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I totally agree that, yes, you can only see the bike lanes when there's no snow.
Yeah. And our complete streets policy too, I mean, it talks about we want to design with these in mind. There are exemptions, you know, extravagant costs, you know, I have a slide for it at some point, we can pull it up if we want, you know, so you have to design to the, you know, maximum extent practical, I guess is the way you put it, you know.
And I certainly hear this during the Transportation Improvement Board when we get presentations, because the more you could isolate with the bikes and protect them, that you want to do.
Yes,
The other
it's
question
encouraged though. I do know
Yeah.
that they definitely, this design is not as stringent to some of the requirements, like on a highway, when there's, I think in one of the CIP projects that WSU is spearheading is a connection from Bishop to Stadium Way, and they're very adamant about the bike lanes, but they have a little more say on a highway.
And
So this is an arterial
It always
street.
hurts when I see people trying to ride on 270. We have the beautiful Chipman Trail. It's safe.
Yeah, we
And,
absolutely can do both approach. We are not too far down one path to take away the bike lanes, and we are not too far down the path to just leave it the way that it is.
Right.
So.
The other question, and of course, when you're talking about buses, I'm also looking at fire trucks and the size that they are, and the ambulances, and trying to traverse back and forth. Generally, the fire department tries to park in parking lots and off the street, but they have to get there, and sometimes that road is pretty small. So,
Depends where the fire is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another consideration. I keep looking at one of the shots that you up there with sidewalks on both sides, which looked really wonderful, thinking that we could expand the sidewalk and include bikes on that, and then you could have the parking on the other side, and you could accommodate both, and it would be somewhat safer, but, yeah.
I think, again, it goes back to, I think you'd be
Cost of money.
spending around another $1 million.
Yeah.
Again, this project, construction cost, engineer's estimates around 1.7 million. So when we talk about $80,000 for biking, I mean, that's a small portion of this. But if you talk about putting in a whole mixed-use path or extending the sidewalks, kind of a whole different project. And so with this grant funding, we're allotted a certain amount of money every few years, really, from the county. They kind of administer this. We don't typically do an arterial streets project every year because we try and do a big one. So we're probably not, at least with the way our, in the past we've budgeted 500,000 to 800,000. So that would eat up the entire street budget that we currently have.
And boy, when you drive up there and you take a look at how the road has been beaten,
It's going to be a nice improvement. It needs to be resurfaced.
really needs, it
And it's
really
going to be
needs
a thicker section. It's
Yeah.
counted for transit and the heavy vehicles. It's going to be robust.
So you've heard a mixed opinion, which is basically what your committee basically said, but you only have so much money. So it's important to get the project done.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means try for bike lanes when you can, and
I
move
do
on.
need direction, specific direction. No, parking is never easy. I don't know. I haven't had to do too many parking ones yet, hopefully.
So Megan, we
But I
have
know they're always controversial. I don't know many instances where we've taken away parking and everyone's been like, yeah, let's take away parking. There's always been, people in opposition of it.
So be-
Rightfully so.
So before we go to repeaters, I want to make sure Megan has, because you haven't been heard from yet, so.
Yeah, I've just been kind of taking it all in. There's a lot to consider, and I appreciate what Becky has said, and I appreciate what all of you have said. I do believe your data shows that there is space available in these complexes. I kind of keep going back to that. And while I understand that that's an additional cost burden for the property owners, I don't know if that totally rings my bell. I think that's something that goes along with being a property owner to monitor those things. And so that doesn't break my heart too much, honestly. I keep going back to the overall goal of complete streets and that we have an opportunity here. Is it perfect? Probably not. But that whole area, I think we can all appreciate, needs some work in terms of trying to make a connection and make it more livable for people, and includes multiple ways of getting around and feeling more part of the community. And yes, it hasn't been fully developed. There will be more development, but this would be, I think, a proactive approach to fit in with that idea of a complete streets type of community. So, yeah, I also appreciate that that's a pretty narrow road and that it would mean taking away some parking. But I think the larger vision of a complete streets community that applies to all of us and doesn't just have apartment land be different. And I think we all have to adjust to the idea that things in the world today, and thinking forward in terms of all those things like climate control and climate realities, we have to start preparing for that. And it means an inconvenience sometimes to people. And I think that's some of the reality, and as a council, we have a chance to look to the future and make some of those hard decisions for a better community.
Nathan?
Yeah, were any students at during? No. Okay, that's a huge,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the customer base. I mean, I understand asking the apartment owners. But, I mean, and, that's fine. The project right now is, what it is, but kind of moving forward, when we look at that, those are people that need to be reached out to. It's going to be more difficult, granted, but, especially, and I know in Becky, my ward, that is the major, those are the major amount of people that we're dealing with. And I've heard both sides, I've heard the biking, important. The interesting thing is the majority of the people who talk about the biking have not necessarily been students. They've been people outside of the ward who like the idea of us moving in this, and that doesn't take away from it, but that just, if looking at the customer base, that aside, one thing that I'm going to go back to because I didn't quite hear answer on it, is it possible to do what I'm thinking is the inside of this loop as the bike lane and the outside of this loop as, some parking? That's not possible at all.
No, not within reason. You only
Okay.
have 1.5 feet. There's not a way to do that. Again, short of a whole, $1 million to redo the entire sidewalk for the length of the project.
Okay, so there's,
Everything's possible. But also, I think when you look at the aerial image too, especially on some of the sides, again, it's really hard to see in plan view. There's hills. A lot of these complexes drop in, and then even those older ones on the bottom portion of Merman, if you widen, you're actually taking away possibly, their front yards. I mean, you just open a whole nother can of worms. Now I have people that are upset about taking away, for the vegetation or the front yard, or it actually extends into a stormwater pond or I haven't, we'd have to look at, I think there's a lot of potential constraints to make that difficult.
okay, I'm just thinking about right around the land and that's
Yeah.
pretty wide.
Still 33 feet.
still-
But nobody parks there, so I think
Yeah.
it feels wider, right? Because you're not having to slow down when you come up cars. It's 33 feet.
Okay.
Francis, next, and then Eileen. Are you guys, okay, Eileen?
Yeah, just real quick, and if, it's mentioned that they were wondering if, like e-bikes and hoverboards and scooters and this and that and the other thing, how they were going to work on the paths and trails. If you look at the code, Ted Weatherly did an amazing job, and his team, I think they had a crystal ball when they wrote that code. So there is already a lot of that is already taken care of in the code, and that's not a heavy lift at all. It's already in there. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. It's already taken care of.
So option one is within budget, is what you're saying.
Yes. Options within budget as well. They're both viable options. It just depends what you want to prioritize.
And it is possible that under these proposals, you could still have some on-street parking in some places. I mean, you showed
Outside
some
of
better streets where there could be some parking.
nearby, so not where you see the lines up on the screen.
Right. So they could at least that. But the other thing is that I know that WSU a couple times has talked about setting up a park and ride complex. Because we do get a lot of people that come in there and then they just find the free parking because they don't want to pay for parking on the campus.
Yeah, I think Northwood would obviously, for the people that are park and ride students,
They
they
can
probably go
Northwood.
to Northwood or
Yeah.
the north end of
So that would take care of that
Merman.
issue.
I hadn't actually considered this, and I think it was when Megan was talking, but it's also, I mean, it's really hard when you do retrofits and rehabilitation projects. It's so much easier to design new facilities when you design it originally. But we do have a bus comes through every 6 minutes. That's amazing. Like, if somebody wants to park down on Northwood, they can catch a bus in 6 minutes and take the loop around and hop off on the next stop. I know that's not super convenient, but that's
It
promoting
works.
transit too. I mean, that's telling us, hey, let's up our transit too. Let's encourage that. So you were talking and that popped into my mind. Nice.
So, from a council standpoint, obviously, Kara would like to have some direction.
Remind me option one, option two.
Option one is remove parking where you see lines up here. We would put bike lanes on both sides of the street, 4 feet wide on each side. Option two is we move forward with the project. We would not do the bike lanes. And so what the final product would basically maintain the same status in terms of parking. We'd have a brand new resurfaced road. So that's going to be awesome. There would be no bike lanes or bike facilities, and we'd keep parking. I mean, they're both viable options.
Okay. Becky?
With a lot of good reasoning one way or the other.
I just want to say, and my option three is that we wait. Wait to see how development goes, wait to see what parking does. And I just want to make the comment, if what someone told you about guests coming to your house is they could park 4 blocks away and take a bus to your front door, that should work. That I don't think you would be particularly happy about that.
And the 6 minutes, I'm sure, is in the morning, not in the evening. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. I think it does slow
That's
down
when
in
the
the
parties
evening.
are in the evening generally, yeah. The guests.
We probably
need
don't
to-
want them driving anyways, right? Yeah, it's a hard one.
Okay, so you've heard of option three is pave, hold off on the bike lanes, allow parking, and then we can mark something up later.
If we go with option three,
And we'd still qualify for the federal grant. even though
well,
there's
we
no
need to
bike.
make decision, the federal grant, we need to proceed with selecting whether that grant's going to pay for the bike lanes or not. If we go with it now, it will cover it. If we don't, we won't have an opportunity probably to add those back in. But we could use our own funds or some other funds to come back in and stripe it at a later date.
And I know WashDOT has an active transportation fund that they've got a considerable amount of money for bike lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called the active transportation. I know they have that because I've seen that come up in our TIB meetings.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, either way,
So where is the council on this?
I worry
Got
with
some
option
ideas.
three, we won't come back to it.
Yeah,
That's my
generally-
only worry with option
That's
three.
generally what happens
And
sometimes.
that's
Yeah.
sad but true. We do that, I feel, too often.
Yeah, the only other advantage, so the type of striping that we're proposing to lay down is a thermoplast stripe. So you lay it down when the asphalt's still warm, and it's not a huge difference in the whole scheme of things, but it has a longer life. So like Terraview from the highway to Airport Road was resurfaced last year. We put down a plastic stripe. If you drive it after winter, it still looks great. So it lasts longer. If we come back later and stripe it, it's going to be a painted stripe, which we'll have to restripe every year. So, but at some point, the thermoplastic stripe also wears. You have to restripe as well. So that's another advantage to doing it now and not waiting, but
Because we could be talking about this all night. So
I know.
Maybe we could get the council just to say where they're
I'm going to rip
leaning.
the Band-Aid. Option one.
Option one.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 option ones, 4 option ones, and 1 3. So I think you got the majority.
that's the
saying option
direction I
one.
need, and we'll return with a resolution, and
we
you
got it.
guys can act accordingly, however it plays out then. I really appreciate everybody's time. I know I overloaded you with information on a really hard topic, so
No, thank you, Kara. That
Well, no,
was
that's
important.
that's what the council are for. So thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, with that, we come to any new business before the council tonight. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? 8:50.